I can go. So welcome everyone here in the hall. Welcome to those who are watching online. My name is Jed Wentz. I'm chairing this session, and I have to begin by making a few announcements. There are changes to the session. Lola Salem has withdrawn due to personal problems, but Ricardo Laspina is going to give the paper that was scheduled for yesterday. So we will have a full session. We are beginning with a paper by Sabine Chaouche, who unfortunately is not here today, but she has pre-recorded her talk, and she welcomes questions. So our idea is, after our famous 5 minutes of discussion, if you have questions for Sabine, that you pose them, and she can then answer when she looks at the video. That is the idea. So, Sabine Chaouche is an expert on the history of the Comédie Française, and she has published extensively, and that is extensively, her work is fantastic, on staging, acting styles and dramatic criticism, acting through the lens of the press, expressionist acting, the representation of female performers, theatrical enterprises, and food in the theater. She's also a playwright. She didn't put that in her bio, but I know that she is. She is the editor of the international journal European Drama and Performance Studies Journal, and she co-leads the international research program Les Contemporains, dedicated to the history of influential female figures in the performing arts. So, now the presentation of Sabine.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for listening to my paper titled Stardom and Scandal, the Queen's Quarrel as an early example of a cancel culture. During the 1770s, a bitter professional dispute erupted among several sociétaires at the Comédie Française, as documented in the diary of Denis Papillon de la Ferté. The contention escalated dramatically in May 1779 through tumultuous assemblies, the circulation of polemical memoirs, and exchanges of exceptionally acerbic retorts. Following Miss Duménil's retirement in 1776, Miss Saint-Val, then established as one of the troupe's principal tragedians performing the roles of queens, asserted prerogative over specific tragic roles already assigned to Madame Vestris. Saint-Val invoked seniority, having debuted at the Comédie Française in 1766, whereas her rival's commencement dated only to 1768. Furthermore, whilst convalescing in the provinces, Saint-Val performed in Toulouse without obtaining authorization from her colleagues, or at minimum neglecting to inform them. Consequently, the directors formally censured her, demanding her immediate return and withholding her share of earnings, a sum exceeding 5,000 livres. Between July 1776 and July 1779, these protracted dissensions, which disrupted the company's cohesion and contravened its founding principle simul et singulis, precipitated recurrent consultations and rulings by both the actors and their ostensibly impartial superiors. The ensuing turmoil ultimately compelled the Duke of Duras and the first gentleman of the chamber, the Crown's overseer of the comedy, to dismiss Saint-Val, the senior actress, on 22nd July 1779. Saint-Val's faction responded by orchestrating a campaign of press criticism and libellous pamphlets. The controversy transcended the theatre as journalists sensationalized the so-called Queen's Quarrel, publishing satires that caricatured Madame Vestris as artistically inept and pathologically ambitious. This historical episode invites scrutiny of the nascent media's role in fabricating celebrity narratives and its capacity to instigate protoforms of cancel culture, specifically organized efforts to ostracize the tragedian through public denunciation as evidence calculated defamation. As Hill and Ali posit, whereas cancelling behavior denotes direct actions by individual consumers, cancel culture constitutes the aggregative outcome of such actions. Both phenomena engage mechanisms of public accountability, social shaming, and reputational surveillance. Though these dynamics are now inextricably linked to digital platform and contemporary discourse, their antecedents remain discernible in earlier socio-cultural milieus. This analysis, therefore, examines how Estris's adversaries weaponized polemical texts and periodical press to exact retribution, vitiate her standing, and subject her to ridicule, arguably in service of exposing structural power asymmetries within the Comédie Française. I shall focus upon the letters published by Claire Marie Mazzarelli, Marquise de la Vieuville de Saint-Chamond, texts constituting a form of proto-activism. So the Marquise meticulously documented the feud between the actresses in her letters, which were printed in 1779. This epistolary critique demonstrably resonated within theatrical circles, likely appearing shortly after Miss Saint-Val's dismissal, and beyond analyzing contemporary acting styles, particularly those of the principal tragedians, the letters expose fractious interpersonal dynamics and the relentless power struggles permeating the Comédie Française troupe. The dissemination of internal dissension was for the era remarkably audacious. That the letters represent an innovative discursive strategy, notwithstanding their conventional form, effectively thrusting a private institutional conflict into the public sphere. From the outset, the character of the Countess delineates the subversive mechanics of circulating polemical writings, as you can see in the following quote. Devoid of cover, publisher, or even privilege, these polemical texts circulated clandestinely upon publication. Papillon de la Ferté, a demonstrably reliable source, noted the Duke of Duras was greatly vexed that Mademoiselle Saint-Val has circulated hand-to-hand a memorandum complaining of injustices she claims to have suffered. Within the letters, the Countess archly implies Miss Saint-Val the Elder did not originate the disclosure of the Comédie Française internal dissensions. Substantial evidence suggests her sister, the younger Miss Saint-Val, likely with the elder's tacit approval, leaked confidential documents and reported remarks from troop assemblies, transgressions for which she was formally censured during a company meeting. In a missive to her colleagues dated 15th August 1779, Miss Saint-Val the Younger asserted she had encountered remarks defaming her sister and kin. So she claimed it's too true that the rumor of a slanderous deliberation has existed. And she added it's too well accepted by the public, intimating that her sister would have been covered in opprobrium. The Comédie Française rejoinder was unequivocal. The troupe disavowed participation in any defamatory enterprise, stating she, that is Miss Saint-Val the Younger, was surprised and satisfied to find nothing in it of what the wicked had persuaded her she would see. So she even added that she was angry at what her mistake had made her do and say. This was succeeded by a troop member's sardonic observation. She then complains that the remarks attributed to the comedy are public. It's to her alone that she owes the publicity, since they were made by her in the corridor, in the foyer, at her friends' homes, and by her friends throughout Paris. This suggests the letters constituted a media strategy engineered to reconfigure power relations with the first gentleman of the chamber. The letters may thus exemplify an emergent proto-tabloid journalism and scandal culture predicated upon celebrity and nourished by purportedly secret intelligence or instigation prompting disclosure. Effectively, they furnish readers with a sensationalist scoop alongside an indictment of the first gentleman, notably the Duke of Duras, accused of power abuse and favoritism toward Madame Vestris, while simultaneously advancing authorial self-justification. Consequently, these episodes resembled a nascent manifestation of scandal-mongering instrumentalized for veracity and a cause. Herein lies their audacity, the author unveils the Comédie Française recital conflicts. The anonymous supplement to the Gazette de France of 17th November 1779 chronicles the War of the Queens through allegorical naval combat. Opposing armadas symbolize the factions. Madame Vestris's white squadron flying the Venus flag confronts Miss Saint-Val the Elder's red squadron flying the Melpomene flag. This characterization deploys erotic illusion, Venus representing Vestris's liaison with her superior, while casting Saint-Val as the respectable muse of tragedy, a pernicious stereotype reducing actresses to either libertines or moral paragons. Similarly, the synonymous satire, Vision of the Prophet Daniel, newly found in the ruins of Jerusalem, translated from Hebrew by an amateur, transcribed in Bachaumond's Mémoires secrets on the 18th October 1779, delivers a caustic portrait of Vestris as a female Ahriman, a hurling venomous snake, notably her lover, to expel her rival from the Babylonian gambling den. So as you can see on the quote which is on the screen, the attacks against Madame Vestris were profoundly vitriolic, deriding the tragedian and in particular her acting prowess. The author seeks to portray the actress in such a denigrating manner as to discredit her entirely, thereby deliberately damaging her public reputation. It's plausible that the Marquis's letters were disseminated in August or September 1779 at the Palais Royal, where pamphleteers habitually circulated incendiary tracts, precipitating significant turmoil within the troop and among the first gentlemen of the chamber. This unrest stemmed from the press relaying sensitive details concerning the internal management and affairs of the Comédie Française. Indeed, during an assembly convened on Monday, 14th May 1778, the actors collectively denounced the pernicious influence of the press. The troupe declared itself indignant and revolted by the repeated and ever-renewing humiliation resulting from journals, protesting their superiors' refusal to order the suppression of any periodical publication whose sole object is to degrade either talent, profession, or person. Nevertheless, the primary objective of the letters appears not merely to critique injustice and patriarchal dominance, but ultimately to defame Madame Vestris and ruin her reputation. The Marquise was acutely conscious of slander's enduring power, noting in one of her works titled Camedris, "The story is utterly true. Eltin tells it to anyone who will listen. I assure you it will be accepted as fact, and in 10 years people will still recount it. Scandalous tales are never forgotten. The wicked souls, amused by them, reject explanations and cling to the rumor. To be happy, one must never give people reason to talk about oneself." In fact, if we retrace the chronology of events, the hostilities became public on 13th June 1779, although they were downplayed when the Paris Journal a widely circulated and influential publication in the capital, briefly referred with notable caution and restraint to the fundamental disagreement concerning role allocation that had erupted a few years earlier between the two actresses. The article further noted the conflict's resolution, attributing it significantly to Madame Vestris's magnanimity in relinquishing her role. It is plausible that this article, alluding to an ostensibly past yet still permanent internal conflict, prompted the Marquise to publish her letters as a means of vindicating the Saint-Val sisters. She contended that the newspaper had capitulated to the Duke of Duras' influence, thereby disseminating misleading or, at the very least, prejudiced information. In 1779, the history of the Republic of Letters and Arts in France alluded obliquely to a war within the Comédie Française, which had displeased the public and consequently diminished attendance at this theatre. The publication rightly observed that this quarrel made a noise and shared with the dithyramb the attention of Paris, whilst the unfortunate provinces resorted to discussing war and the genuine interests of the state for conversational material. The dispute has transcended the professional sphere, generating salacious gossip that detrimentally affected both theatre attendance and the company's reputation. September appears to have marked the zenith of media attention. According to Bachemont's Mémoires secrets, Simon Linguet swiftly ridiculed the Duke of Duras, for whom he held scant esteem, provoking the latter's fury to such an extent that the Duke instructed the journalist to refrain henceforth from mentioning him to the public under threat of a beating. Indeed, in September 1779, Linguet published a summary of the affair in his Annales under the title "The Actress Struck from the Register," and he directly assailed the influential superior, asserting that Miss Saint-Val could achieve more in the public sphere and Madame Vestris in the chamber, the latter being supported by one of the president of the order, namely the Duke of Duras. The Marquise, in turn, posited that the Duke of Duras wielded considerable influence over the press, and she claimed his protector has forbidden all journalists to speak of her save in extravagant praise, and de Saint-Val in protracted criticisms, hoping the public will credit them. This manipulation doubtless explains the work's anonymous publication and lack of an imprint. So we can see here in this on this slide, this quote, that beyond the comic portrayal of the distraught superior lies substantive questions regarding press manipulation, mass influence, and what may be construed as proto-disinformation. One discerns censorship, paradoxically countered by those boycotting Madame Vestris's in turn. And the Marquise, for example, writes, "I avoid as much as I can the days when she, Madame Vestris, invades the theatre." The letter's conclusion revisits this suppression of dissent and restrictions upon printers. The Marquis writes, "Solicited by the superior, who does not care if anyone knows how he conducts the comedians entrusted to him by the king, you will easily conclude that it's not easy to complain when you're being molested. Thus, through this evasive strategy circumventing censorship, the author advances a discourse imbued with feminist sensibility, thus resisting patriarchy, while simultaneously demonstrating pronounced animadversion through scathing critique of all forms of censorship." The letters proved remarkably incisive. Indeed, Papillon de la Ferté mentioned this printed memoir wherein the Duke of Duras was strongly compromised. A rhetoric of calumny gradually coalesced, with particular arguments orchestrated and reiterated across successive portraits in the press, by intensifying the assault upon Madame Vestris, targeting not merely her theatrical prowess, but preeminently her character and private affairs, and by composing an elaborate tract which far surpassed a mere jeu d'esprit intended for diversions. The author of the letters effectively deprived the Savas faction's principal rival of the capacity to utter a credible and audible voice, thereby effecting her silence. The Marquis' pamphlets, which invoked public sentiment to denounce a purported conspiracy against the elder Miss Saint-Val, constituted, through a deliberate conflation of juridical, political, and critical registers, a symbolic execution of the adversary. In this instance, another woman, Madame Vestris, was rendered the object of comprehensive derision. It remains incontrovertible that the tragedian offered no public rebuttal regarding the affair, which remained unresolved until 1784. Indeed, only subsequent to a formal complaint lodged by the younger Miss Saint-Val, who threatened resignation from the comedy and levelled accusations of mistreatment against Madame Vestris, did Vestris finally rupture quiescence. She seized the occasion to revisit the dispute, labyrinthine in its pettiness and surreptitious manoeuvres, which had opposed her to the elder Miss Saint-Val and quite unequivocally to settle outstanding grievances. A wholly divergent narrative was presented within a missive dated 24 January 1784, presently conserved within the Library Museum of the Comédie Française. On this occasion, the letter received immediate publication, forestalling any riposte from the younger Saint-Val, save for the initiation of a final futile lawsuit against Vestris at the Châtelet. Nevertheless, the superiors intervened with alacrity, imposing a peremptory termination upon the proceedings. Madame Vestris's epistolae bear the unmitigated virulence of the attacks she had sustained in 1779, as you can see on this screen. She mentions, for instance, a vile libel which appeared flooding Paris, and she claims she was covered in shame therein. She adds, for instance, that the public believed her removal was the result of her jealousy, the removal of Miss Saint-Val's removal. So we can see it had a strong impact. In this episode, Madame Vestris publicly accused Miss Saint-Val of having orchestrated a form of cancel campaign to tarnish her reputation and shame her. Irrespective of whether these actions were deliberately contrived, the tragedian's testimony reveals a mechanism of systematic character annihilation at work, enabled by the pamphlet's dissemination, which compels us to reevaluate the role of print media in celebrity construction, the potency of defamatory press, and the discursive arsenals deployed in such scandals. It further invites broader interrogation regarding intra-company dynamics, the instruments employed to combat calumny and ad hominem assaults, and the strategy by which performers endeavored to safeguard their professional standing. This missive thus functions as the epilogue to the Queen's Quarrels, a conflict that had profoundly marked the late 1770s, whilst the public, for the most part, would evince no lasting animus toward Miss Vestris throughout the 1780s. A tumultuous detractor would subject her to vociferous disapprobation in March 1784, constituting one of the terminal reverberation of a dispute skillfully conducted by calculating hands and tectonic social forces. So finally, as we can see, the letters published by the Marquise functioned unequivocally as libel, assailing Madame Vestris's reputation and personal character while participating in a proto-cancel culture. Thank you.
Moving to our next speaker, Ricardo Lasquina researches 19th century music, vocality, and recordings, enjoying membership in international study groups, presenting for scholarly societies. He received research awards, visiting scholarships, has published and forthcoming contributions that include the Grove and the Realm. And he is a concertizing tenor soloist, private voice teacher, coach, and composer. So, we welcome you.
I need help with my tie clip. Sorry. Prova. All right? Okay. Sorry, I was in the middle of a reading. During the time in question, Madrid's opera singers found themselves absorbed into a unique microcosm where both modern opera and its critiquing constituted a novelty, wherein their notoriety or celebrity may have seemed magnified disproportionately. Thus, pondering the conference theme, the topic suggested itself, but without focusing on my predilection for vocality and singing, for, as I shall argue, that may not have been enough for Madrilenian critics to warrant or constitute even a singer's celebrity. Beyond questions of objectification, lionization, and deification, I will attempt to show how the importance of Spanish critics Spanish critics have always attached to stage presence and acting when confronting the best singers they had received for the first time that century. Oh, let's see. Okay. So this is I'm working with two years, 1821. This is and 1822. This is the 1821 roster, just for reference. And it's not. I've got the. Oh, I'm sorry, I had it upside down. Okay, there's that. The following example best illustrates the basis for that assumption, wherein the critic himself provides a maxim best encapsulating certain critics' motivating attachment to the aforementioned precepts. This stems from the 1820 debut of Cremonese soprano Carolina Massey with Eco de Padilla critics, anticipated with curious speculation resembling youths, self-admittedly, sophomorically awaiting the entrance of a high school prom queen, calling her buena moza, or good-looking girl. Though yet to appear on stage, she is reassured by the critic that physical appearance augurs well for a stage career and congratulates the company for signing her. Sign del Viejo de las Gafas Verdes, author Manuel Casal concludes, citing Horace in... Oh.
You press twice.
Yeah.
Why don't I do this for you?
Why don't you? That's why.
Is this the part?
Yeah.
Okay, I will sit here.
Okay. I'll put this here. let's see. Let's illustrate the assumption wherein. Okay, so yeah, okay, so we're on slide. Okay.
Slide 3.
Okay, so we want slide. Yeah, that there. Now slide 4. Citing El Viejo de las Gafas Verdes, author Manuel Casal concludes, citing Horace and paraphrase, admonishes Massey that what enters through the eyes is more convincing than what enters through the ears, and questions whether she has the extension and flexibility requisite of the soprano voice. Eco de Padilla, 20 September 1821. Essentially, that's Horace's quote, what we learn only through the ears makes less impression upon our minds than what is presented to the trustworthy eye, end quote. Slide 5. Ironically, not even the highly regarded but avowedly middle-aged Lorenza Correa had been immune to overzealous scrutiny when embodying ingenue roles, for instance. Ultimately, even the sober, musically literate El Universal, after positively describing youthful Massey's vocality and musicianship, pronounces her unequal to the task of standing in for the matronly prima donna in her absence. 3 days later, 23 September, Eco's Viejo reassures public and artists that her stage fright was unnecessary, and concurring that her voice was of, quote, very good metal and always in tune, end quote, but concludes, quote, that she was liked more by the dress circle than by the mezzanine, that, end quote. That is, her popularity rested more with the male rather than with the female audience members. 6. Okay, now let's slide 7. Yeah, there we go. Okay. A strong dramatic soprano with a notable Italian career behind her, Massey was already 39 and just 11 years Correa's junior when editor José María de Carnerero somewhat irreverently describes her as buena moza, a good-looking or fetching girl. On September 7th. Yes, corroborating Eco statements, the final triplet of a 1811 sonnet dedicated to her begins Immobile da lei pende chi la mira. She leaves her onlookers hanging motionless, but concludes E palpitando per lor casi rei con decebolo e Orlando ognun sospira, implying a convincing dramatic pathos and her Spanish critics, which her Spanish critics barely nod to. Massey was not the only singer on whose physical appearance and the critics focused at the expense of her acting or singing abilities, be they male or female, and many more examples exist that, surveyed together, might give a greater general perception of how this dynamic applied to other singers, be it antagonistically or supportively. Rather, moving ahead to the seminal 1822 season, I will focus on 2 cases where the singers so excited the reviewer with their singing acting abilities as to garner very high detailed praise as actors. 7. Okay. Without broaching the pro-vernacular spoken word versus Italian opera problem, the following example, Universal 20 September, divulges yet another crucial facet of this. It's the next one. No, it's the one before. This.
This one.
Yeah. Another crucial facet of this critical mindset, somewhat contradictorily laying the matter bare from the viewpoint of the former group, illustrating that opera is not received without resistance, hinting at a cultural mindset confronting professional operatic artists. The opera's triumph becomes more evident every day in the capital itself, where not many years ago, people were filled with annoyance just hearing the name of Italian opera, and I'll skip ahead. However, sensitive connoisseurs, being those who really understand entertainment, would also like a good dramatic company and half a dozen actors who can recite works by Racine, Alfieri, Voltaire, Corneille, or Crébillon to the letter. This statement constitutes powerful testimony not just to the importance of theater to Madrilenian society, but also of opera's otherwise untold struggle to impress them during this hitherto unstudied phase. At issue is that, firstly, opera was inextricably linked to the theatrical system, and secondly, the question of fashion or of an Italian fad or Italian novelty question is already discussed by 1821. Slide 8. But as we progress to 1822 and the Opera Italiana's second season with a new company, the fascination with the new Italians in the Opera Italiana is not limited to their musical prowess alone, but interestingly, their acting ability, such that for some critics it transcends as an incidental condiment of their singing and instead brings them into the realm of the actor. This is not treated lightly. In some cases, critics analyze their performative abilities metaphysically and in technical terms, transcending the ubiquitous currencies of genre slang. Therefore, there exists the intriguing possibility, however unstated in the opera critique study, that some critics were holding out hope that a new model of Spanish vernacular stage might be held out, combining the requisite mystique of the stage celebrity. This would entail combining both the level of an Isidoro Máquez and the artistic perspicacity and celebrity of an Italian singer. Slide 10. Okay, wait a minute. Yeah. No, we're way ahead. That's not right. We should be here. Yes. Okay. While the acting of Adelaide Sala gets Universal's 2nd May 1822 stock description of quote, noble and copacetic with the spirit of the music and with the dramaturgical situation, which the spirit of the music and dramaturgical situation requires, end quote, his colleagues surpassed his enthusiasm to the point of comparing her acting to that of the otherwise incomparable Isidoro Máquez. However, this fleeting example strikingly conjures not just a comparison with a man, but with one who after studying with Talma in Paris during voluntary political exile, is dubbed the hope and glory of the Spanish dramatic stage. As for Espectador's currency of expression, 8 May 1822, nowhere is the Spanish penchant for the dramatic or spoken word performance more manifest as when projected onto Sala's performance. Here, in an astonishing and practically unheard of comparison with the paragon of Spanish actors, it bespeaks a clear-cut prerequisite even for the singers with godlike voices of critical approval. For the first time, Madame Sala made her beautiful voice resound throughout the theater's entire ambitus with the introductory recitative to the precious cavatina di tanti palpiti, filling the moment in question with sublimely dramatic and theatrical gestures and action, and accompanying the vocal articulation with natural expression, gestures and attitudes of movement demanded of the situation being portrayed. She accompanied the variety and succession of ideas expressed in the music very fittingly and with an inimitable propriety, reminding us of the Proteanism, if we are permitted to call it that, of the ill-fated Máquez, who, those who know the difficult art of uniting performance, timing, and with tasteful delivery of the vocal lines simultaneously, cannot but admire a variety of her gestures and movements. As astonishing as it seems, Sala's performance was not only made her the object of critical deification, but here also of unlikely comparison with the late Máquez, the Talma of the Spanish stage. for her perceived shape-shifting abilities. Moreover, the Spectador further demonstrates how singers' stage presence and acting in Tancredi was an important factor in motivating the audience response. The critic recounts how Tancredi's throwing the gauntlet when challenging Orbasano and graceful salute when, with his sword when going into combat frenzied the audience and so enthused them for Sala as to fear that some of them were going to take the stage by storm. An archetypal stage Spaniard or Barbieri's supremacy. In our final example, Madrid's peculiar critical view of the palpable casticismo of Il Barbiere di Siviglia bears noting as a measurement of singers' abilities in the peculiar Spanish sense, how they fare in delivering their respective roles through singers is the closest. Those singers is the closest they come to being judged as actors in a play of national significance, an association which Barbieri had long since taken on for the Spanish public's concept. In this regard, baritone Domenico Vaccani's otherwise unexpected position among them constitutes a particularly fascinating case. Preceding the opinion of Barbieri's music, El Indicador de los Espectáculos, 5 September 1822, delves into analysis of the opera's interpretation by the singers, premising it on the oft-repeated question of getting past the previous cast's first impression on the public. Respecting Vaccani, this met García Paredes, Madrid's first Rossini Figaro, and a Spaniard. Possibly one of the most intriguing encountered thus far in intriguing reviews thus far encountered in the vast body of articles studied. The critic probes this impression of the artist's portrayals, starting with the most difficult character, Figaro, because the role of the barber is much more difficult to execute in Spain than in other countries. The judges are more exacting because Figaro is Spanish and the public equally so. An Italian entrusted with handling the Andalusian costume must have a lot of stage skill to succeed in front of Spaniards, and this part of his portrayal presents great difficulties. Vaccani has managed to level them all. Slide 13. I'll jump to the... And to start, he continues, the costume did not offend, being the creation of a reputed seamstress, sought after by toreros, manolos, and skilled in vestidos de majo. Always spared no pains or expense in preparing himself for the role. As implied above, of course, this would mean little, and had Indicador not deemed that Vaccani's acting was perfect, his masterful deliberation, his fetching and lively delivery, in a word, he got it down, and what's more, he made the role his own. Slide 14. Of course, his singing also carried the day, evincing any recollections of his now unfortunate predecessor. The imagery critics evoked around Vaccani's Spanishness, conveyed largely through the part of Figaro, is neither accidental nor a mere matter of the literary inspiration behind the character's construct. Rather, they were also keen to notice the extra care taken by the artist entrusted with embodying the barber to make the impression that much more immediate and impactful. While distinctly from Indicador, Universal shares his enthusiasm, imparting his own intriguing impression of the opera's no less castizo protagonist. Vaccani sparked new hope in and drew laughs from the audience. It is true that this appreciable actor shines extraordinarily in all kinds of roles, but in that of Figaro, which is one of the most difficult for a foreigner, italics ours, He employs as many resources as his comic genius can suggest. It's curious to see him imitate the Andalusian imperiousness with which, and the air suggestive of a civilian. It is, if he spoke Spanish with a little more lisp, ceceo, anyone would consider him to be Pepeillo's countryman. Pepeillo was a reformer a reforming toreador, and he established rules of the corrida de toros. Therefore, there exists the intriguing possibility, however, and stated that whatever, am I doubling back on myself? Therefore, there exists the intriguing possibility, however, and stated in the opera critique studied, that some critics were holding out hope that I think I'm going around in circles here. Yeah, there we are. Okay. Moreover, Vaccani's formidable penchant for castizo stage presence business does not stop with the now legendary Figaro portrayal. For Universal, this carries over from what he and Espectador initially delineated in Barbiere to Carlo Coccia's La Festa della Rosa, evoking as strong an association with characteristics typical of costumbrista imagery, January 18, 1823. These two observations, the last referring to Vaccani's appearing dressed as an alcalde de barrio, or neighborhood warden, at an iconic contemporaneous figure and fixture of Madrid's neighborhoods, bookend the singer's progression towards a popular figure who reminds audiences of a countryman and not a mere pretender. This is understandable as his 3 decades long tenures in Barcelona and Madrid constitute a major part of Vaccani's career. Thus, that what catches some Spanish critics' attention regarding appropriate performance has less to do with singing than with the acting skills needed to complement it. In many of the critiques being discussed, the idea conveyed is not merely one of enthusiasm for good acting, but rather of recognizing the artists as real actors. This phenomenon seems less prevalent when reporting on the Spanish artists. They had almost without exception, all begun their stage careers acting in plays or melodramas as in lyrical vehicles, opera, tonadilla, zarzuela, operette. It was rather the recently arrived Italian artists that had the power of surprising their Spanish critics by demonstrating some level of thespian quality acting. This was such that when combined with the prerequisite vocal skill, it aroused levels of audience enthusiasm reflecting in a certain columnist's exaggerated excitement. Essentially, becoming worthy of this typical critical currency seems tantamount to legitimizing a singer's time on stage. It was crucial that acting be properly and skillfully wedded to the vocal line to create illusion in opera. Thus, what emerges from further reading is not just the singer's quality of acting, but rather their ability to be identified as actors, and constitutes a concern for our critics. This dichotomy, amid arguments dismissing the need for good acting in opera, begs the question, is opera a theatrical spectacle or simply the musical performance? Thus, it follows that their penchant for criticizing the singers on acting resonates as strongly about about what really mattered to local critics in a spectacle and on which Spanish tastes still impinged. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for a topic very close to my heart. Shall we take our accustomed 5 minutes and then we'll do some questions? Move to question time now. Because we have a short lunch break, we're going to be very strict with question time so that we can make sure to enjoy our meal. I would propose that we pose questions for Sabine all together. Does that make sense? So I'm going to be bold and take my chair's prerogative and ask Sabine a question. And that is, Sabine, I would love to know which roles were being contested, and can you see in those roles some kind of reflection of this idea of Venus and Melpomene between the actresses? So what qualities are actually being contested? What does the actors need for those roles? Or does that not play a role at all in this dispute? That's my first question. If there are questions, please don't pose them until I give you the mic, or Sabine won't hear them. So, do we have any more questions for Sabine?
Sabine, congratulations, very nice paper. I Ricardo Laspina, I was looking at mine when you were delivering yours, but by the same token, I couldn't help but hear that you mentioned that someone was threatened with a beating. Is this something you encounter very frequently? Is this directed at actors? Is this by critics? Is this by patrons? Or did I hear you incorrectly?
Any more questions for Sabine? Apparently. Okay, then I have, once again, I use my prerogative and I have a question or two for you. The first is, you mentioned Racine and Alfieri. I'm very curious, were they being performed in translation? Do you happen to know?
Yes.
Also Alfieri in translation.
Also Alfieri in translation. It just depended. The censorship was a double-edged sword. There was an ecclesiastical censor, and there was a secular censors.
Right. So it's not a question that there was an Italian-spoken theater and then Italian opera.
It was
arrived.
a vernacular theater, and there were also vernacular operas and operettes performed, and the operettes became known as zarzuelas because they were largely one-act pieces by Méhul, by Delairac. Grétry were actually turned into more of a Spanish vehicle for they became beloved of the vernacular theater camp, so to speak, if we're talking about people who are really opposed to this wicked Italian concept coming through, and it's just the idea of music devoid of any dramaturgical interest, and little by little they'll argue for that, and Italian opera will become appreciated, but this is like just happening.
Right. Okay. Then I have a second remark/question. Actually, it's something to just think about, because I was struck in the quotation about Sala that they talk about this protean quality that she has. And I think usually when we see actors being described as protean, we think that they can go into different characters. But it seems clear to me in that quotation that they're talking about her ability to change in her attitudes, in her gestures within one role. And so I find that very interesting, because that would indicate to me that she has a full command of the passions and how they are expressed through gesture and attitude. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. And it's there's another critic who basically just lambasted her for the opposite and took that all away from her. I think there was some bad blood.
Yeah.
It was pretty much a sandbox of this fanatical liberalism, short-lived freedom of press expression, and there was a lot of fake news as well. There were a lot of things. She was also accused of being protected by a count which she was supposed to marry, and that's still regurgitated into today. I've now studied all of these mentions about her, which nobody had apparently before, and it dawns on me that wasn't the case at all.
Right.
He married someone else from Italy named Adelaida and died the next year. She was contracted to sing. She did not become a countess.
Okay. Are there any
By
more questions? Here we have a question.
Yeah, I was also really struck by the proteanism bit of the quote and was trying to work out what the context was for that term, but also because in that quote, so she accompanied the variety and succession of ideas expressed in the music very fittingly and with an inimitable...
Could you just repeat that last half of the sentence?
The first half. She accompanied the variety and succession of ideas expressed in the music very fittingly and with an inimitable propriety, reminding us of the proteanism, if we are permitted to call it that, of the ill-fated Marquez. I was interested in the connection of propriety and proteanism, which I guess maybe would push us in the direction of the sort of classical attitudes approach to acting.
Yes.
So I wondered if this was to do with the indecorum of a more authentic romantic style of acting that is so I mean, just it ties in nicely with some of the discussions we've been having about authenticity and distance, etc.
We are on the cusp.
I'm afraid we have to break for lunch, but we will continue this discussion at lunntime. Thank you.
But that's about all I could really say about it. We're basically on the threshold of that.